Okay, sounds good. All right, apologies for that, everybody. Just, you know how technology can be. So, thank you all for coming. We do tend to read the Indigenous Land Recognition Statement passed by SGA years prior before we have events like this. So, we'd like to recognize that the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point occupies the lands of the Ho-Chunk and Menominee people. Please take a moment to honor and acknowledge this ancestral land and the sacred land of all Indigenous peoples. All right. So this forum today is hosted by SGA and facilitated by Stevens Point Television, our student television here on campus. We are here to hear from three candidates for the Portage County Executive. We have Chris Holman, Eric Olson, as well as John Pavelski. So to start off, I think we'll allow each of the candidates to go in order and kind of give an explanation. Each of your answers will be limited to 3 minutes. So keep that in mind as we go forward. We'll allow you each to explain why you're here, why you think you'd be a good candidate, and exactly why you want to run for the position. So we'll start with the person in person here. So Eric, you can start off.
Sure, thanks a lot. And thank you SGA and the student television for helping to make this possible. Thank you to the students who came out and anyone who's viewing online as well. Just thank you all. So if I had to say why I'm doing this, it's really because I love Portage County. I've moved here in 2004, and I've really just found the community and the people to be amazing. And what's driving me to run for this office is that I hear from a lot of people who are frustrated that they can't make progress on certain issues. There's tremendous community capacity in our local governments, in our nonprofits, but they feel like they're being stalled out by the county. And so I know that with a different leader, we could get through some of these things and we could make some progress on issues around groundwater. We could have a more sustainable Portage County government. We could embrace renewable energy and energy conservation. And we can basically have the quality of life that students would want if they want to stick around, have the quality of life that makes all the residents that are currently here happy. And that same quality of life is what draws people into this community. It makes it easier for existing businesses to have people apply for jobs and come to Stevens Point because we have an amazing quality of life. So I'm running basically to carry out a vision, but I'm also running because I also want to open up government. I think that there's a lot of decisions that are happening behind closed doors or maybe in between meetings, and my goal would be to have radical transparency. I think we need to open up government so that everybody knows what's going on, so that it doesn't seem as though the script has already been written before the committee meeting even started, so that everybody gets a chance to weigh in on issues. And I know that we can do this because I've had more than 14 years working with local governments and working with communities, and it's a tried and proven way to do this, is to open up the doors, open up the windows, and make government as transparent as possible.
Thank you. We will now move to Chris.
All right, so I'd like to just echo what Eric said there about thanking everybody, SBA, SBTV, for getting this together. It's a good opportunity to have these conversations, and I know a lot of work goes into it, like you said, getting the text sorted out, but sorry I'm not there in person. My wife's actually our town clerk, so she's training election workers tonight, and hopefully my kids' favorite show will carry them through the hour. As far as, why am I seeking the election? I won't lie, the last 2 years have been particularly challenging for everybody. There's been lots of ups and downs for across the community, and that certainly, county has not been immune to that. But I think what I'll just say is that when I first decided to run, I could see from my involvement in our town's politics, but also I got involved with the county's Farmland Preservation Committee, which was a little over 2 years in total. That there were just a lot of things that people were disagreeing on, and a lot of disagreements hinged on personalities or just the inability for people to kind of put things on the table, figure out where the consensus was, and kind of put egos, personalities, all that stuff aside, and figure out what makes the most sense. And what I mean by that is that I think it's important for people to acknowledge, and I explain this to a lot of folks too when they reach out to me, and I do get a lot of public input, feedback, and interaction, that many decisions or almost everything happens really what the consensus and the group can agree upon and what puts the county in the best position. And sometimes that's going to run up against people's personal politics or their opinions, and I think it's important that when you're involved in something like the county where you're really looking at as Portage County goes, we're a complex county in terms of who people are, where they're at, and what they value, and where they want to see things go. And so it's not, some things are more straightforward. It's not always easy to thread the needle on things. So my approach has always been to be very intentional about building relationships, building trust and rapport with people, whether that be members of the county board, staff, or the public, so that when these conversations do take place, that people understand that, where maybe there might be more of a place for the kinds of things that distract progress or keep things from happening, it really isn't as welcome in those conversations. And by and large, people do a very good job at the county of putting those things aside and really trying to focus on the issues. And I've built that culture. I've been able to kind of shift things in a way that some of the more complex conversations are able to take place and get down to brass tacks. And even some of the really mundane things that shouldn't be languishing on someone's desk gathering dust just because people can't get along, getting those moved forward in a productive way. So that was my intention in terms of running. It wasn't to say that one candidate or the other was better or worse than me. It was to say that I've got a different perspective to offer. I've got a different approach. I don't seek the spotlight in terms of issuing press releases about every single thing that we do. I work a lot behind the scenes to empower policymakers and staff so that those conversations can take place. And I feel that I've made a lot of progress in that regard.
All right.
Obviously, there's still lots of complicated issues. The bulk of those issues still don't run through the county executive position, really, but run through the committees and the county board itself.
I don't mean to cut you off, but you have exceeded your time, so I appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yep. And we will next move to John.
And thank you, Ms. Martin, for inviting me in the SGA leadership. I decided because basically I was complaining too much. The conversation I got involved in, I started complaining about this to my kids that if you complain, it won't be the problem, it'll be the solution. So I decided to put my hand in the hat for the county executive and try to get a solution. I see a lot of government getting bigger and bigger, and that really concerns me. And I also see government getting more expensive and expensive as time goes on. I got 7 children. I was talking to my daughter the other day, and I said, honey, you realize that if you get married in the next 2 or 3 years, if you want to live in a 1,500 square foot home in Portage County, it's going to cost you $240,000 to $250,000. How are you going to make that happen? It would be kind of difficult for you to do that at this time. You have to save a lot of money and work a lot of hours at a current rate. So that concerns me. And so I started looking into the county exec position, and I saw some irregularities that were concerning me, which actually I want to bring up as this forum goes on. And that's why I'm running. I want to trim down government. I believe I can make the county government run more efficiently and save you, the taxpayers, some money. And that's why I'm running. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I also realized I probably should have introduced who I am. My name is Will Fader. I'm the student body president here on campus. And then for our audience members going forward, we'll be reading some prepared questions, others submitted by the audience. The candidate guide over there has a QR code on the back to a Google form where you can submit questions. So first off, we will start with a kind of pretty broad question. What is your view on the duties of the county executive? And we'll just go in the same order. So Eric, you can start us off.
Sure. And again, it's pretty understandable that people aren't sure what a county executive is. There's only about 11 counties in Wisconsin that have a county executive. The best way to explain this, I think, is to realize that county government is sort of like a subunit of state government. The state of Wisconsin has a number of obligations and responsibilities that it has to carry out, but you're not going to find in Portage County a whole bunch of state workers somewhere. doing all this work. Instead, they transfer money to the counties and ask the counties to carry out these responsibilities. Things like taking care of farmland, things like taking care of our interstate highways and our state highways. All that comes to the county. And at the state level, you have a lawmaking body, the legislature, and you have an executive office, the governor. So at the county level, we have the same thing. We have a lawmaking body, which is the Portage County Board, and we have the executive office. I think county executive is a bit of a misnomer. Some people might say, oh, that's going to be the person that has to wear a tie and a blazer every day as the executive. The reality is that it's essentially the governor of the county. So what does that mean? Well, the governor of Wisconsin has a tremendous amount of power, right? He doesn't get to write laws, but he is charged with implementing these laws. So the governor has to carry out the things that the county board passes. And fortunately, the executive doesn't do that by him or herself. You work with the staff. And so just like the governor appoints department secretaries at the state level, the executive has the ability to appoint department heads at the county level. Similarly, the governor proposes a budget to the legislature, and the county executive proposes a budget to the lawmaking body. They can pass the budget as presented, they can make changes to it. If they make changes to it, the executive, just like the governor, has the ability to veto those changes. Those can be overridden by the lawmaking body, just like the state legislature, but it requires a 2/3 majority. So the executive is basically the governor of the county.
Thank you. We will next move to Chris.
Yeah, no, Eric's totally correct in saying that the county, and part of this is I don't want to call it a conflict, but sometimes some of the confusion is that the county really is the arm of the state, and that generates some frustration because municipalities have a little bit more authority under constitutional home rule, whereas counties have administrative home rule, which means that we still have to play by the rules the state dictates to us. And so on a lot of the key issues that frustrate people, whether that be groundwater or anything really where the state kind of preempts and says we have the authority, the county is really limited in those areas. And so I think there's the charge for county committees and county executive to try to figure out what can be done at the county level that doesn't run up against that and also doesn't maybe encourage the legislature to kind of rewrite certain laws. And they've done that where sometimes people have, or municipalities have pushed the envelope from their perspective anyway. And even with mining laws, things like that, there's a lot of caution involved in the conversations because the legislature could just step in and rewrite entire parts of statute if things don't go the way they think they should be going. But as far as the county executive itself, the statute is very specific in some of the areas in terms of what the executive needs to do, and Eric outlined some of those, but it leaves a lot of it open to interpretation until you're in the position, I would say, because the county really does have a lot of momentum of its own, and I'll just say a lot of the time that's forced upon you in that sense that you are in charge of the day-to-day administration of the county. So you really need to be flexible to be able to shift your priorities day to day and week to week while still maintaining a steady calendar of the things you regularly have to work on. And then you still need to be able to carve out that time for additional initiatives and projects that need to be looked into and pushed along, which essentially are aiming towards improving county services, programs, and policies. For example, recently the healthcare center has taken a lot of my time for the last 9 months as I coordinated that effort and led many of the discussions with the committee and others. And a lot had to happen in a short period of time. And 9 months might seem like a long time, but really as the county goes, it's not, it goes fast. So you have to recognize what needs more or less of your attention at any given moment on a daily basis, and you need to be able to kind of compartmentalize those things because so much of what the position is involved in is unique and varies a lot from department to department. It's not a company doing all one thing. So delegation becomes an important part of that too, because the county executive can't do anything on their own. They don't craft or formulate policy on their own. They need people to buy in and understand why something's important, and then those policymakers need to make those decisions. So essentially, the county executives, like Eric said, is similar to the governor. There's just one person. You can use your authority and use your clout, if you will. You've got to be judicious about it. And you got to understand that still the foundation of all is relationships. And if you spend that in a way that kind of alienates people and gets people looking at you cross-eyed every time you talk to them, then you're going to find yourself in a really tough place.
Thank you. We will next move on to John.
Hey, thank you. Here's where we're gonna have a major, discussion, a major discrepancy in how we view the county executive. If I could, I'm gonna probably take quite a bit of time, because this is a real major issue in my candidacy. If you ask the question, what is your view of this, the county executive, it's not about my view, it's about what the statutes say and how they're supposed to be administered. There's only like basically 6 responsibilities in the statute, so I'll let you read them and kind of go over them if I could. It's not going to take about 10 minutes, is that okay? Or do I have to just kind of just summarize them?
I will have to ask that you stay within the 3 minutes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Want me to summarize?
Yep, you will have to stay within the 3 minutes. My apologies. It's just for sake of time and fairness to the other candidates as well.
I'm sorry, but I cannot understand you. I can read them.
Can you go?
John, I don't know, is my mic working?
Yeah, that was a lot better.
Each respondent is limited to 3 minutes at a time. And so
Yeah.
in order to keep us on schedule, we can't have 10 minutes to one respondent and 3 minutes to other respondents.
Okay, so how much time are we allowed per question, may I ask?
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. So basically, they outline some of the duties of the county executive is to determine the department heads and supervise them. One of his major duties is the budget, and also he basically has the responsibility of veto if he so chooses. Because the county executive gets to supervise the department heads, there's basically 13 departments that the county executive is over in Portage County. The way the county government works is that county supervisors are elected from the 25 districts of the county. Those county supervisors put committees together to solve the problems that people bring to those county supervisors. Those 16 departments are to supply all the information and to solve those problems that the county supervisors are gathering and are setting up committees to solve for. It's the county executive's responsibility to make sure that those 16 department heads who are very, very, there's very, very detailed job descriptions for them. They're highly educated, highly experienced, to make sure that they are doing the job of what the county committees and supervisors want. To make sure they're running efficiently, the answers are being answered quickly and economically, so that the will of the people gets done. To me, it's not the county executive to go out there and determine this person or that, or what the policy should be done. My job is to serve that county board and those committees through the supervisors that are hired, that are appointed by me to, again, serve that county board. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So we're going to move on to a question posed by the audience. As county executive, what is your first goal that you would like to accomplish? And we will start with Eric.
Sure. First goal I'd like to accomplish. Like I mentioned before, radical transparency, opening government up to the people. The county received an allocation from the federal government of $13 million as part of the ARPA for state and local recovery funds. Other counties around the state received similar amounts. Each county got an amount that was proportionate to how many people live in the county. Most counties in Wisconsin opened up the doors and the windows right away and said, let's start engaging the public and let's start talking about what the priorities are. What are the critical issues in this community? Let's start hearing from community members. So they did focus groups. They did surveys of the population. They had meetings, focus group meetings with people from, say, families that are struggling with healthcare, or people in the outlying areas that are trying to figure out broadband internet. All that work was done last summer and into the fall. In Portage County, we've not done any of that. We need to start catching up with Eau Claire County, La Crosse County, other counties that are already figuring this stuff out, so that we can use this money, which is meant to address an emergency, right? So the emergency is now. The healthcare crisis is now. The child care needs are right now. I want to apologize for Chris Holman, who can't be here in person, because he himself is having a hard time getting child care because of the pandemic, right? So a bunch of the workforce is out, and it's hard to get people into child care. The city of Superior just announced that they're giving out $200,000 to child care centers to start getting more availability for child care. We're going to start, apparently, in a couple of weeks maybe, thinking about opening up the door to have people give input. And I would say we're running behind. So my goal is to right away crack open the door and engage the public and invite people to participate in their government.
Thank you. We will then move on to Chris.
Yeah, so just real quick, Eric's right.
There are a lot of counties that moved different paths forward. From our perspective, the final rule from the U.S. Treasury only came to us in January 6th. And so that rule has provided a lot more nuance and detail that would allow those conversations to be sort of more empowered and more nuanced than they would have been, say, 4 or 5 months ago, when there was still some ambiguity in a lot of those areas. So we will be doing those things. And since the ARPA funding is eligible for use through 2024, it really was our perspective that it makes sense to be prudent and take our time to make sure that you're leveraging that funding in a way that really puts the county in a better post-COVID position than it was going into COVID. So in terms of the first goal, I would say we continue the work I've been doing in terms of generating the sort of stability within the process, whether that be the day-to-day operations or the policymaking process, so that a lot of the distractions that historically have kept things from being addressed or kept personalities in charge of not having them be addressed, get that stable platform moving forward so that you have a much better place to operate from. And we've made a lot of very positive movement in that direction. There's still some to be done. I think that's probably going to be a constant in any government, but nevertheless, I think that really when you have such a diverse array of people who are policymakers who are making decisions, and that county is complex as far as it really pays off to take the time to say, let's try to set the table in a way that the distractions you see happening in other jurisdictions or across the state or even nationally when it comes to political discourse, that sort of thing doesn't infect the conversation in a negative way. And allows people to be heard, allows people to bring forth their perspectives, and then, as it relates to ARPA or anything else, allows you to really dig into the details and explain to the people who are showing up, how is this going to work best moving forward, given all the different factors that are coming into play. And so while there's been a lot of, I keep saying, there's been a lot of good movement in that direction, I think there's still room to be done, there's still room for more of it, because, I think we're making very good progress for the first year or two of my term, but then as COVID hit, that's been just a massive disruptor. And Eric's right, it really has affected people across the spectrum, no matter where they're at. And so we've taken some near-term, some short-term sort of stabs at tackling some of those issues, but you really don't want to move too quickly, especially in government, just because when you do, you often leave a stone unturned or a perspective unheard. And when that happens, then somebody or some very important thing could be left out of that conversation. So by continuing to kind of build that stable platform, get people to the table, and have conversations that really need to be had that haven't been had just because, for whatever reasons, there's just been some general sense of dysfunction, you're able to set the table in a way that gives you a much better chance at moving forward in a constructive way.
Thank you. We will then move on to John.
The first thing I would do is I'd meet with, Al Hager, the county board chair, and just talk with him. Because basically, I believe the county executive and the county board chair have to work very, very closely together as best as possible for the rest of the county. Find out what his priorities are, and also what I want to find out is actually what his needs are. Because my job as an executive is to serve him and the board and those committees. The only way I can serve them is by knowing your needs. If I don't know your need, there's no way I can serve them. By knowing your need, I can try to get that need fulfilled. So if you meet with Al find out where to prioritize my time, and also where to prioritize the use of the departments that I supervise. And I meet with all the county board supervisors, and again talk to them and basically have the exact same conversation. Hopefully, I'd actually have that conversation prior if I were to be elected, so I could come in the position running, and find out where their concerns are, and then again, as Mr. Holman has stated, it can be very difficult to get a consensus and try to get all that together, but I do that as best as I possibly can. And then I would actually, what I want to do is I'd ask for the permission of all the people that I supervise to have them take a profile. I've worked with a communication program that actually can profile people, and it tells me what their character traits and their attributes and some of their strengths are. And by knowing their strengths and their attributes, I can work with them a lot better and understand them a lot better, and I'd actually explain how I'm going to, what that means to them, because a lot of people really don't know some of the gifts and the talents that they really have. And I want to basically accentuate those gifts and talents that are within those supervisors that I'm going to be, or those directors that I'm going to be supervising, because that's where we become effective as a government. I can find out where maybe some places where we weren't as efficient as we should have been by doing that, and then attack those places as best as possible. Some communication problems will arise by analyzing that. I will try to fix those communication problems. And once you explain to people what you're doing and how you're doing it, they usually all tend to come in agreement. They realize it's very, very well needed. Again, it's a program I work with corporations, and it works very, very well. But that would actually help the whole communication process between me as the executive, the directors that I supervise, and some of the county board members. That's what I would do at first.
All right, thank you. Considering that this is a student-hosted forum, I will now ask a more student-centric question, but it could apply to the entire community. Is student retention after their graduation in the Stevens Point community important to you? And then if so, how do you plan on keeping students in the area after they graduate? This time we will start with Chris.
Yeah, thanks. The short answer is yes. I mean, you won't be able to retain everyone, but I think it's also not only about UWSP, and I say that because, we've got a lot of great apprenticeship programs for the high schools. UWSP and Mid-State Technical College have increased their cooperation and collaboration in the last couple of years. And so everybody's trying to find ways to find avenues for people who are in school to stay locally, find a path forward that can keep them in the area. I think you can do that in a number of different ways, but I think that there's a lot of discussion around recruitment, but we're also seeing a bigger focus, say in the last couple of years, on retaining the people who are in your community. And I know the students come from all over the place, but they come here for a reason. They're studying areas at UWSP where there's a lot of things happening in Wisconsin within those areas. So being able to stay here and work in those areas remotely or in some form or fashion that kind of takes advantage of technologies and just kind of the way the workforce expectations are changing and what people are looking for is a real opportunity. I think that, as I said, with remote working technology in general, there are more and more opportunities where people can stay here where they like to live. They may have grown up here, and they can still be able to work here either for businesses in or outside of the community. And that can happen in a lot of different ways. And I'll just say traditionally, the Centuries, Gamber Johnsons, others of the world, they've really inhabited that space in a big way. And in speaking with them, they've seen that there's been a huge transition through COVID where now that arena of workforce recruitment is at almost everybody playing in it now, trying to find people wherever they're at to come in and lend whatever strengths they have to whatever department, job, business that they're interested in. And it's becoming less important necessarily where someone is, but at the same time, I've also been involved with an effort that looks at how would you invest in people on the front end and getting them here. because we know that if you can get nurses, truck drivers, or any of the home folks into our area, that there's a systemic effect through the economy, through the community, where those people bring their families, they bring themselves, their expertise, all those things to bear, and those are all huge positives, and students are a huge part of that as well. They're often on the cutting edge of whatever the issue is that is coming up and being discussed. So nowadays, everybody's on that same path to one degree or another, and I think the county, really every business in the region is looking at that, and that would be a major focus moving forward for anybody. But the county is definitely not immune to any of the workforce challenges that are out there.
Thank you. We will move now to John.
Thank you. I just want to make just some comments as far as, being students. I would suggest you just work really hard. I told my kids that when you're in college, I'd rather see you take a hard course and get a C than take an easy course and get an A. Really go for, the learning experience that you have right now. Actually, my son got out of college, he says, Dad, I wish I would have screwed off as much as I did. I wish I really would have worked a little harder, studied a little harder, because it really helped me out later in life, and I really would have loved to learn what we were trying to teach. So I would suggest, from my 2 cents, is that you just work hard, take hard classes, and because a GPA really won't matter years down the road. And also just have great character. Be honest, be diligent, be dependable, be trustworthy, and you'll go far. That's what a lot of the employers are looking for right now, and they can train you pretty well and help you get trained in what you want, as long as you have the character that they're looking for. And what I also suggest is, you're doing a lot of reading, a lot of studying. Look for apprenticeships, just practical experience to what you're involved in. If you're pre-med students, I know the whole thing with the whole COVID going on, that you can't get in the hospitals to, volunteer or whatever, or you can maybe talk to over Marcia McDonald over at the healthcare center to work with the elderly. That's maybe not possible at that time. She probably actually would work with you. She's that kind of a person. But getting that practical experience. There's tons of excellent businesses in our county that will love to give you an internship or some kind of apprenticeship, and work with you to get some of that practical experience that looks really, really good on a resume. So with that being said, what can I do for you that you're an excellent student? I want to retain you in the county. So basically, again, I got 13 departments that I supervise. One of those departments would be the Parks Department. We all have a job to do. We like to work, but also it's nice to have fun. I'm going to be working with the Parks Department to make sure that we've got those frisbee golf places available. We've got the bike trails, the hiking trails, and the parks, the lakes. That those are as beautiful as possible with the budget we've got further to that. I'm going to be listening to the needs again of the county. And again, if you want something in the county, that's why you go talk to your county supervisor. That information trickles down to hopefully eventually the committees, and the committees are going to look for support, which I supply them, and then those get done. So if you want certain things done in the park, hopefully I can service that. Also, the Department of Health and Human Services. Eventually, if you're going to move in the area, you're hopefully going to have a family. If you have a family, you're going to have kids. You're going to want those kids, mentally healthy, physically healthy. We can provide you information to get that done. That's one of my jobs as a county exec, to service you through the Department of Health and Human Services, to get you that information that's concise, and the information that you want, and it's easy to get, and it's on the website or available to get. And if you can get it, if there's other sources for it to get much easier, I can either eliminate that service and have it done someplace else cheaper to save you money. Another aspect is, again, a whole aspect of attracting businesses. That's key, is we've got a lot of diversity of business in Portage County. I can work through the planning and zoning department to keep permitting processes down, to keep rules and regulation down, hopefully work with taxation principles and precepts that they want to move into Portage County and stay in Portage County, so that we've got excellent jobs that they are actually looking for people like you to hire, and that you fill those jobs and stay within the area.
I don't mean to cut you off, but we have exceeded the time. So thank you. And then we'll go to Eric.
Yeah, thanks. So the question is how, about recruiting and retaining students. Yes, we need this. We're entering an era of workforce scarcity, and you all are going to be fortunate, right? You get to kind of pick where you live and work. We have to make this community attractive. We have to make it attractive to young people. I believe, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe young people like to live in a place that makes progress, that solves problems, that embraces diversity, that has a vibrant art scene. All these things are possible, but I'll tell you that right now the county board, as it stands, is right now a conservative county board. This is a nonpartisan office. All the county offices are nonpartisan, but there's roughly a 13 to 12 conservative split. And so someone mentioned Al Haga earlier. He's the county board chair. He's selected by those 13 conservative county board members. Their goal is seemingly to grind the gears of government slowly and to not make progress. We could be making progress on groundwater. We could be making progress on renewable energy. We could be embracing diversity, but for the county board chair who prefers to grind things out. I don't think I need to necessarily pick fights with the county board chair, but it's the role of the county executive to present an entire county perspective. The county board chair is represented by, or is voted in by one district, and then gets selected chair by those other 12 board members. But that means there's 12 board members that maybe don't agree that that person should be the county board chair. And so yes, amongst the lawmakers in the county, there can be debate and there'll be disagreements. The county executive needs to say, let's embrace the entire community, and that includes the city of Stevens Point. That includes the students. Most of you probably have no concept of what's going on at the county level. That's preferred by some people on the county board. They don't want to hear your voice, okay? I'm talking about radical transparency and involvement so that we can solve these problems, so that we, like groundwater pollution, so that we can not only embrace the parks, but I think we could, for example, the county has a great bicycle and pedestrian plan. We don't have to buy cars and drive around in cars. There's a bicycle and pedestrian plan. It's largely sat on the shelf for the last 4 years. We need to start implementing things. We need to start solving problems and making this the vibrant community that it really could be. There's so much potential here. And I really want the young people to realize that we are solving problems. We are moving forward. We're making progress.
Okay, thank you. We will now move into a question about something that has dominated our lives for the past 2 years. So what are some problems that arose in the community during the COVID-19 pandemic, and what solutions do you have or have done to combat these things? We'll once again start with Chris.
Sure, well, it's quite a comprehensive question, really. I mean, the level of disruption and impacts from the individual level to the sort of business to organizational, I mean, across the board, it's just been a comprehensive impact to anybody, whether that's Portage County, state of Wisconsin, or nationally, globally, really. And so it really does present a unique series of challenges for people to work through. And so I think the things that we've done to, early on there was some conversations around economic recovery. Some of that was led by the city. So I participated in those conversations, trying to understand from business owners' perspectives and from the public's perspectives, like what are the things that are challenging the most, like in the moment. And it was sometimes difficult to wrap your hands around what that was, because it was constantly changing. And so it became really, really crucial to have good networks throughout the community with open communication and regular communication. And honestly, there's no way I could capture everything in 3 minutes, but the point is that we set up a community call through the United Way that has all the different shelters and groups supporting the community. The county's involved in all of those, figuring out what do those people need, what are they experiencing, how do we help them work through what they're experiencing. And that sort of networking allowed people to leverage what they had in terms of resources and to give them to others so that they could get them through whatever they were dealing with. And sometimes that was more challenging than others. You know, there were times early on where shelves of the grocery stores were empty, and so then a lot of the food distribution through shelters and whatnot was suffering because a lot of times that food they're relying on is coming through those grocery outlets. Similarly, we still have these calls. They haven't stopped. We have a regular community call with our EMS, fire, law enforcement, hospitals, our regional emergency readiness coalition, everybody directly involved with trying to tackle the pandemic and on the front lines, if you will, and understanding what they're facing. School boards, all the schools are in these calls, and they're sharing on those calls, like what are they experiencing, and then that allows people, either myself or public health or the state representatives on the calls, to understand what is the lived experience that people are really reeling from, and what are the steps that can be taken either in the near term with something more immediate. That can be mass distribution, which we've been able to increase that a lot lately through DHS's help. Or through vaccination efforts, through conversations about what is COVID-19, how is it manifesting in the community, trying to educate people about all the ins and outs of what's happening to them. And it's such a challenge to try to overcome that. But what I'll say is that I was very heartened by all the things that were taking place across the county. And the county was just a piece of those conversations, but we had a big role in a lot of them, especially in the public health front. And we were able to bring a lot of things to bear that help people get through what they face. Eric referenced general care. There's all kind. It's comprehensive, but the long and short of it is that as a community, we pulled together, we stayed together, we kept communicating with each other, and despite the ups and downs, we were able to pull through some very difficult times, which are still challenging, and will be challenging until we get to some sort of recovery phase, and then obviously everybody will start shifting into what that looks like. And we're at the end of a very long chain, and the feds and the state and everybody has a say in sort of what happens and what the framework looks like for what people try to do at the local level.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. We will then move to John.
When I take a look at the whole pandemic, from throughout history, you don't quarantine the masses, you quarantine the sick. By shutting down all the businesses like they did, I think they actually created a worse problem than not. And that's where we're going to actually feel the repercussions of that, even going forward from here. And also, by allowing, shutting down the schools, this whole masking of children in schools, I think is a major disservice. That when you take a look at the research that I accumulate, that the susceptibility of anybody under the age of 18 to the whole epidemic is very, very, very low. So that is one thing that I probably would have looked at a lot closer, and allow the freedom for people to make their own decisions, and also different kinds of remedies or medications that were available for COVID treating. Talking to healthcare professionals, respiratory therapists, that there are a lot other medications and procedures available out there to treat that are actually working very, very well, and that they really weren't available to them or weren't prescribed to them by their organizations. And so those I would have tried to push through as best as possible, give people the choice to try what they felt was best for their situations, and hopefully alleviate the problem quicker, rather than, again, having the government come down and say one size fits all. I would have tried to listen to the local people a lot more. What do they see is working? What do they see as the benefit? And implemented those as a local level rather than the overreach of the government.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to Eric.
Sure. So yeah, the county has a Health and Human Services Department. The county has certain powers that it could be implementing. I think in contrast to John, I would say embrace the science, follow where the science leads, and do what you can to keep people safe. Do everything you can to keep people safe, right? We've lost people in this community. I'll give an example. There's a gentleman who for a long time was running the Salvation Army, the Hope Center. It's the only kind of open homeless shelter in the community. He's one of the people that we lost to COVID, right? So it's real, okay? It's not some imaginary thing. And the science points out that it's airborne, right? So this is why we're wearing masks. We kind of were distracted, I think, early on with a lot of sanitation theater, thinking that this was somehow just germs that we were passing from hand to hand, but it's an airborne virus. So right away, we should be thinking about, well, how are we going to adjust to this new reality of having an airborne virus around? That means thinking about things like heating, ventilation, and air conditioning in ways that most of us hadn't had to think about. So buildings on campus, for example, need to be thought about in terms of what's the air handling. The buildings that we have in the county, we have to do the same thing. We have to make sure that there's a good, efficient system for delivering fresh air into the building so that there isn't the possibility that a virus is building up. This could be good for this coronavirus. It could be good for future illnesses. It seems as though a lot of these same things are applying to the flu, for example. So it's not going to hurt us to think about lessons that we could have learned from this pandemic. Embracing the science, I think right now we're fortunate that there's the Marshfield Clinic right next door, and they've been doing some really path-breaking work on how to get more people to accept the vaccine. This county is not doing well in terms of the total uptake of the vaccine, and as a result, we have a number of people who are still vulnerable to becoming seriously sick by contracting this virus, and those same people can transfer the virus to other people. I want to touch on healthcare too, or I'm sorry, on childcare again, because the story that I heard from a woman who, again, was struggling just to keep her childcare operation open, she was telling me that now it's actually impacting the foster care system. There's parents out there that want to do foster care, but they need to go to work as well, and so they need childcare for the children that they're going to foster. But they can't find anybody to offer the childcare. So now think of where that's going. That means these kids that probably are in a dangerous or frightening situation can't get into a foster home because we can't provide childcare. I would say that crisis is today. That's happening now. And it's really sad that we don't have a plan in place. The county has a planning department. We have people who have demographic skills. They could have spent time the last couple of months trying to analyze how much total demand is there for childcare? How much total supply is there of providers? What are we going to do when people start dropping out because they get sick? How do we build in some surplus supply so that we can handle disruptions like what the Omicron has brought on, right? But it's not happening, and I think that's because of a failure of leadership.
Okay. All right, thank you. Now, there were many questions asked here. We only have an hour. We also suffered from technical difficulties. I will just say that the question form will be sent to each candidate. You can ask questions that were not asked here and release them in whatever form that you so choose if you want to. But I would like to give each candidate an opportunity to kind of give some closing remarks about their campaign and their candidacy here. This time we will start with John about the closing remarks. Did you hear me?
John, did you catch that?
I did. I'm just trying to remember the paper. Sorry, I just need a little time. My whole purpose when I read again the statutes from the county executive and what the requirements are, it's like that's my job description. I enjoy putting people in place and creating an environment in which they become efficient and they serve. I'm a servant leader. I'm there to find out what the needs are of the community and fulfill those needs. Again, I'm very concerned about the overreach of the government coming down from the federal and the state. There's a lot of authority at a local government, and I do not want to allow that authority to be sucked up by the state or federal government. Because that's where I believe government should take place. The people in that area know what's best for that, for those people in that area. I just have practical business experience. You know, I want to save you money. I want to save me money. I've got 7 kids. I've got 6 grandchildren. I've lived in this area my whole life. I don't want to implement any plan, any procedure, do anything that can, you know, harm my children now or in the future, or you. And that's basically, you know, and the whole gist is I do not want to, and I think we all see sometimes the availability of special interest groups where actually the county executive is not really accountable. It's accountable to people during election time, but then after that person's elected, it can potentially abuse his power. And I really appreciate Chris Holman for not doing that. But you get the wrong person in, and it could potentially be abused. And I'm very concerned about that. Also, what I want to do is I want to actually define, I want to put a job description. There's no job description at all for the county executive. I want to define some of those duties of the county executive, how it works with the department heads and how it works with the committees, because there's certain committees that are directly related to those department heads. And there's really no organizational or a document that allows that to flow very, very well. That's one of the reasons I actually want to put that together. And actually, if it's put together well, there might be a possibility of even eliminating the county executive. And that's one thing, you know, Chris had actually campaigned 4 years ago about potentially eliminating the county executive. And I haven't talked to him, but I actually was, if there's any information on why that didn't happen or where that went, but I think it potentially would be possible, I'm not sure yet, that it could actually be eliminated and save you, the taxpayer, a lot of money and streamline the government. Because again, government is getting bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes on. I want to actually create it smaller and more efficient, if at all possible. And that's my whole goal. And I appreciate you again inviting me. I wish you students the best. You are our future. I mean, you're going to be making decisions for me in the next 10 years, which home to put me in. And so again, when I visited you over here about a week ago at the Devote Center, I was greatly amazed at your willing to sacrifice, money and time, your time for other people in the community. I wish I would talk to you some more. And thank you again for your time. Thank you for listening to me. Have a great night.
Thank you. We will then move to Eric.
Sure. So thank you again for putting this together. Thank you, students, whether you're getting extra credit or not, for coming out. Thank you, anybody who's listening online. I would say this. I mentioned earlier that there is sort of a conservative majority on the county board. And I would say that they prefer that you not know what's going on at the county. They prefer that you not even think much about county government at all. Even though it's the biggest unit of government around, even though it's right in your backyard, you can bike to the county offices right downtown. We don't open up the doors enough to the campus and to student participation. And I think that's because they don't want to. I want to. I think that there's such amazing people, both on this campus and in this community, that can actually be part of solving problems, that can actually be invited to the table, okay? But you need someone to make the invitation. You need someone to facilitate the discussion. You need someone to be a visible leader. And I want to be elected by the majority of Portage County to be that person, to open the doors, to bring people together, to have that radical transparency, to have a participatory government. I think we have tremendous opportunities in front of us in the immediate term, just in the next couple of years. But I also think that this county is well positioned for the long term. There's such great natural advantages that this community has. If we could just nurture those, if we can protect our groundwater, if we can protect surface water quality, we can have natural amenities which are just part of why people come and stay in this community. If we could also support a vibrant art scene and the culture that makes a place unique, right? My motto is basically around building and protecting the public good. And the public good is groundwater, it's the atmosphere, it's the climate. But the public good is also sense of character, sense of place. Stevens Point and Portage County has so many little nuggets of this sense of place and community character, but they need to be protected. If they're just left to their own devices, they go away. You all will get a chance to see this in the next couple of weeks because there's a church in downtown Stevens Point that was just sort of left to private hands to try and figure out what to do with. It's a 100-year-old building. It's really unique. It looks nice. And it's going to get torn down because nobody stepped forward and said, you know what, this church is actually part of our community culture. This is part of our sense of place. Let's figure out a way to protect it. So I want to keep the county moving forward. I want to make progress. If you think this resonates with you, I'd ask you to vote for Eric Olson at the primary on February 15th. Thank you.
Thank you. We will then move to Chris.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'll just real quick.
Just to respond to a couple things were said, I think that nobody at the county benefits from not having public engagements. And it's a challenge not just for Portage County, it's for every local government. It doesn't matter where you're at, trying to get the public engaged. And we're taking steps in that direction. Remote technologies allowed us to do what we're doing tonight even, to start recording videos and putting them on YouTube and elsewhere so that people have another avenue to engage the process. Because when you put in a lot of work over 6 months to a year and then people haven't engaged and they engage at the last minute, that generally is not a favorable position for trying to get something moved forward because people are trying to catch up with all the work that's been done. As far as the county executive position, I'll reach out to John and talk to him. There's pros and cons to any approach. I certainly see some pros in the county executive position, but I'd also say that if the county executive went away, there's a high likelihood that you have a county administrator, which most likely would cost even more because you're getting somebody with not somebody who's elected at large, but somebody who's coming in with a really large skill set in terms of public administration, things like that. And also, just real quick, in terms of the pandemic and filtration for the air, things like that, Eric's correct, and that's why we invested about $500,000 into filtration devices in all the county buildings to make the air safer for employees and the public. But in terms of why I'm still continuing to have an interest in running for this position, aside from having a life where I've dedicated a lot of my years to public sector and public service in general, I think I've found a lot of benefit to, and others have too, to what I've been doing. And so I do a lot of work behind the scenes, like I said, and that's wrapped up in building relationships in a very intentional way, very one-on-one, trying to empower people, trying to get people to step out of their shells and bring their voices to the table. And that's as true for policymakers on the county board as it is for the public. And really it's trying to figure out what puts the county in the best position. And that isn't wrapped up in what I think. It has to be what we think. The people who work with me, who support me in this position, they're all over the political spectrum. I'm an independent, I'm not affiliated with any party. I think that's important for a nonpartisan position. But the folks that I interact with all the time, and the people who endorse my campaign, they value my approach and recognize that I don't bring my own opinions or politics to the position as much as I work to keep the focus on what's best for the county. And by and large, there are clear answers to what's best for the county regards to the issue. And in terms of, for you as students, I think that I spent, if you're familiar with me at all, you'll know that I spent nearly a third of my life in teaching in the academic world. I understand where students are at, how the university operates. I understand how entities like the county can approach university for complementary work that benefits everybody involved. I've been doing a lot of that already. There's always room for building that up, and I think we're going to see more of that happen too through various programs, more remote these days with COVID. But prior to COVID, I was reaching out and going to classes and giving speeches on agriculture, climate change, all kinds of different issues that are being discussed there. And I think that the type of relationships I build on a one-on-one basis with folks are the same sorts of things you're seeing with mid-state and other entities, businesses, and so on. And even mirroring programs like you see out of Dane County, like university, where you're taking student research and applying it to real-world problems and figuring out how can you bring all that knowledge and research to bear for policymakers to have more information at their hands when they're making those decisions. Because a lot of the stuff you get is somewhat boilerplate. It needs more nuance and detail. So there's untapped potential there. I think we can help provide more opportunities for that and for some more fun experiences between students and county. I know there's internships and things like that already exist, but really I think that there's a good mutual relationship between university and county that can put all of us in a better position overall. And thanks again for putting this together.
Yes, thank you. All right, so that brings us to the end of our time. We ran a little bit over, but we started late, so that's fine. I want to thank everybody for coming today. I want to thank all the candidates for taking time out of their day to be here. And remember to vote on February 15th.